programs. What we're not prepared to do is work with the UK to deal with a joint response on the Channel, which is absolutely what they should be doing. They have a duty, the same as we do, to save lives in their territorial waters. They have a capability to do that, but politically, they're not prepared to do that right now because it suits them.
4 people have been injured after a Second World War bomb exploded in Munich. The aircraft bomb went off at a construction site close to a railway line. The Munich Fire Brigade said 1 person was seriously wounded. Footage has been released of Arsenal defender Gabriel fighting off armed robbers at his home in North London. One of the attackers, 26-year-old Abdi Muse, was armed with a baseball bat. He was later arrested and jailed for 5 years. Former US President Donald Trump has strongly hinted about running for office again. Speaking exclusively to Nigel Farage in his first British interview since leaving the White House, he addressed the Capitol Hill riot, talked about Boris Johnson and discussed his intentions for 2024. Well, you can watch the full interview tonight in a 2-hour special on Farage at 7 o'clock. Well, you're right up to date. Now it's back to Alex and the afternoon agenda.
Well, it wasn't a story, and then it was. And yet, it always had been. The truth is, spiking went nowhere. It's only we'd simply stopped talking about it, with so many other pernicious and alarming cultural horrors culminating to essentially brush it under the carpet in a society where sexual liberation and narcotics normalisation eclipse and undermine incidents of horrific violation. Most girls know by the age they start going to nightclubs to never leave a drink unattended. Companies have even brought out litmus-style tests to detect whether a drink has been spiked. And so, the perpetrators have apparently changed tack. Recent months have seen an explosion in reports of victims, largely women, being injected with something on a night out, with varying reports of the subsequent effects. All of them, though, have one thing in common: a clear indication that a needle had pierced the skin. Yet, the first few reported incidents were casually dismissed with headlines such as "Experts say scenario is far-fetched" in the Scottish Herald, "Injection spiking is likely rare, so why are we all so scared" in the New Statesman, while the Mirror described one victim as a hysterical teenager, and the Daily Mail asked, did all those nightclub needle attacks ever actually happen? Even now, when you Google injection spiking, the first link is to the good old BBC News website, with the headline asking, "Injection spiking, how likely is it?" Well, I don't know. Maybe the fact that hordes of women across the country are exhibiting red injection sites while many have been hospitalised with terrifying symptoms would suggest to me very likely indeed, or else all of these women are deranged liars. And you wonder why so many victims of rape are afraid of coming forward in fear of not being believed or being ridiculed. Yet, this isn't just affecting women, is it? An internet search reveals a host of men also reporting attacks. And let's not forget that the most prolific drug rapist the world has ever seen preyed upon young, straight males in Manchester, counting as many as 280 victims over 12 years, although Reinhard Srinaga would lure his victims back to his apartment, offering help to drunken, disoriented partygoers, to then ply them with date rape drugs and seriously sexually abuse them. But ask most women today, or members of the gay community, whether they think they have ever been spiked. And you may be shocked as to how many have strong suspicions that they have. Among my friends, the trend is horrifying, with one even believing she was drugged at an event in Parliament. The difficulty, of course, is when alcohol is involved, doubt creeps in, and the victim starts to question the chain of events, with so much condemned to memory loss, a trait, of course, of the drugs used in most spikings. Just 2 days ago, a report in the Yorkshire Post told of 2 women in their 20s taken to hospital, fitting and foaming at the mouth, with blood tests revealing substances produced as a reaction to illegal drugs, and evidence of puncture marks on their backs. I remember, aged 18, calling my parents from a phone box in Cheltenham, disorientated, afraid, and unable to talk, with saliva running down my chin. Lord knows how my dad found me or conveyed me to A&E. So how, 20 years later, is this still a problem out of control? Today, we really need to talk about spiking. Well, let's start first with the story of Millie Taplin from Essex. Millie had her drink spiked with an unidentified drug on her first night out after turning 18. Her mother, Claire Taplin, posted a video of Millie in hospital on social media to raise awareness of the issue. Now, please be warned, this video is a difficult watch, but it demonstrates the reality of this horrible crime.
I've got you. I've got you. I've got you, babe. I've got you, darling. Do you know where you are?
Well, Claire Taplin joins me now. Claire, it's fantastic to have you on this show on such an important matter. How did it feel as a parent seeing your daughter in that condition?
Horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Nothing, you can't explain what that felt like at all.
What was the sequence of events? How were you alerted to the fact that your daughter was spiked? Was she able to contact you? Did hospital contact you?
No, she'd gone out. She was with her friends, which thankfully stayed by her side the whole time. They contacted her elder sister first because they'd been ringing my phone, but I was asleep. Luckily, I woke up, see I had loads of missed calls from an unknown number. I answered it and it was Millie's friends. And they said, oh, you need to go to the hospital. We think Millie's been spiked. And I thought, oh, she's probably drunk because she's never been out before. She's not a very good drinker. So I rang my daughter because they said she's with Sadie, she's at the hospital, and I could hear Millie in the background. And I just knew there was something very, very wrong with her.
And what did the staff at the hospital do? Were they able to take a blood test quite quickly, or...?
No, they don't do blood tests. At A&E, I got there and I said, what are we doing? You know, what's going on? What she had? And they said, look, we see it so much. We don't take blood tests, not in A&E. It costs too much money. It takes too much time. And it could have been so many different various drugs. So it was just really a waiting game. Obviously, if she'd had really bad effects, it wouldn't go away. They probably would have tested eventually, but they just wanted to let the drugs wear off.
And I assume after that you reported the incident to the police. How did they respond?
Yeah. Well, they were quite good. I mean, there's not really a great deal they can do about it with no real evidence who or how, you know, these people are getting away with it.
But you'd imagine if the hospital had done a blood test, if the late night venue she had been in had CCTV footage, which they all have, something quite possibly could have been done. Do you think that in hindsight...
Well, they said, yes, in hindsight, they probably should have, but they see it so often. And they said this, they said, oh, where's she been? I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on air. Has she been to this club? And I said, yes. And they said, we see it all the time. We don't even bother testing. I was like, well, I'm not sure how I feel about that, really, because, you know, it's horrifying to watch her like that.
Yeah, and absolutely people should not be able to get away with such a horrendous, horrific thing. How is Millie now? Has she recovered? It must have been massively traumatic for her. It must have left her in fear.
She had a lot of side effects. She was completely covered in a rash from head to foot the week after. Then all her skin peeled off. Literally, she looked like a lizard. It was horrendous. Physically, she's fine. Mentally, I'm not sure. But she's been out. She's more cautious now. But it's horrific.
And in terms of as a parent now, when she goes out, you must be terrified yourself that if it happened on the very first time, that, you know, post-18 she goes out to a late-night venue, then what are the chances during the rest of her adulthood?
Yeah, you do think that. I mean, I worry every time she leaves the house, but, you know, it's not fair for her to have one bad experience and never go out or enjoy herself. So I think she learned a very harsh lesson to be careful, you know.
I mean, you put the video up on social media. It was a fantastically brave thing to do. She precipitated a whole load of reaction and regenerated public awareness, actually. It's something that's been going on for decades. And frankly, I don't think anyone's really done enough to tackle this if 20, 30 years on this is still happening. Do you think that right now, the response to this from the police, from hospitals, from the public, from the government is enough, and that they're taking this seriously enough?
No. I posted that because it was the most horrendous thing I've seen in my life. And I thought, I don't think people realise what really happens when someone's been spiked. You hear it all the time. Oh, yeah, I've been spiked, I've been spiked. When you see it, it's a whole new level of, wow, what on earth are they giving these young girls? Look at her. She was like that for hours. But she was aware, and the scary thing was she knew what was going on. She was trying to speak to me and she couldn't speak. It was just slurred, and the panic in her eyes was, I'll never forget it, never.
It's a shocking video to watch, Claire. Thank you for sharing it with the public and raising this important issue, and thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about it today. Really, really appreciate it. That's Claire Taplin, who is mother of Millie Taplin, who was horrifically spiked, as you saw from that video. Well, Michael Kill is the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association. He joins us now. Michael, thank you so much. I mean, as someone in the nighttime industry, this and the latest spate of reported needle spiking incidents must be really concerning for you.
It's horrifying. I mean, as a trade body representative, as well as a father of a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old young girl, I have concerns for the future, as a father and parent would. I think the challenge that we have, and which we're sort of standing up to, is ensuring that we're robust in our processes and really challenge.
Yeah. We're struggling a little bit with our connection there, so we're going to see if we can try and get Michael back. But for now, we are going to move on to our next guest. So joining us now is Jim Campbell, a former Home Office forensic scientist whose expertise includes toxicology, drug and alcohol cases. Now, one thing that really shocks me, Jim, is when these reports first came out, and there were girls who had taken selfies of what looks like injection sites in arms, on legs, the headlines, as I said in my introduction, just seeks to cast doubt on the whole thing, seek to be saying that, well, they must be making it up. This isn't possible that, you know, people can be getting spiked via injection. What was your reaction when you first saw that? Were you shocked, or did you think, no, this is plausible?
I think it's plausible. I've spoken to a few police officers about it, and they are quite sure that it is happening. It's really dreadful because some of the drugs that could be used are really nasty.
What sort of drugs do you think are being administered? Is this, do you think this new trend is to evade certain other measures that might have come into place, where people will keep drinks in bottles or even have little litmuses where they can test for drugs in drinks, that they've resorted to using needles? Or is this about the type of drug they're administering?
Well, it might be because there are tests around now and safety measures for drinks that people have moved to this stage. All the traditional drugs that have always been used for spiking could be used for needle injections, but there are also some very powerful analgesics that are based on a drug called fentanyl, and these are incredibly powerful, and they are used by anaesthetists under very controlled conditions, and when you inject that into somebody, you don't know what's going to happen at all.
I mean, I was spiked when I was 18. I know most of my friends are. I don't consider myself any sort of isolated victim here. I know a lot of people who were spiked or strongly believe they were spiked, and I'm pushing 40. And it strikes me that nothing really has been done to prevent this from happening. Do you think the problem here is that these drugs leave the system quickly, and by the time people get to A&E, they can't test for them? Or do you think that that's actually a pretty lousy excuse, and that there are ways in which to find out what's going on beneath the surface of this horrendous spate of crimes?
Well, it is true that the drugs do leave the body quickly, because most drug testing is designed for employment testing for people that abuse drugs quite often. So a one-off event will leave the body quite quickly. The problem really is that the police have to have a test done with a chain of evidence. And so you need a proper evidence kit. It needs to be observed. It needs to be tested properly. And then the result needs to be recorded so that you know that person was spiked. It's very easy, you see, for the police to be hoodwinked by somebody that deliberately plays around with the drink to try and get somebody into trouble. So it has to be a chain of evidence. However, the testing itself, it isn't true what was said earlier, that you do a test and you don't know what you're looking for. Modern analytical equipment now will tell you what it's found. So you need sophisticated lab equipment, but it's certainly not complicated. And we've done that. I've done this analysis myself many times, and I've helped support groups as well.
But in terms of if someone fears they might have been spiked, the difficulty is, of course, if you're out on a night out in a nightclub, you're drinking, you don't necessarily remember how many drinks you've had. A lot of people end up worse for wear when they're tottering home at, 2, 3 in the morning. Is it the case that a lot of these spiking drugs act in the same way as alcohol, and so it's hard to identify if you've been spiked or not? Or are there clear signals that something's happened to you and you've had a drug put into your system involuntarily that is more than just alcohol?
They tend to overcome you quite quickly. So if you ingest it in a drink, then within 15 to 20 minutes, you probably feel really awful and pass out. If you're injected, it will act between 4 and 10 minutes, I would say, probably more likely 4 minutes. And so any sudden change, if you're with somebody, they should be alert to that and know that something really strange has happened, and then take control of the area, get you to a safe area, and then try to organise some testing, because what we need is the feedback from the analysis, so the police have something to work on. They will have lots of information on how these drugs can be obtained, that sort of thing. At the moment, it's really difficult for the police. They do have quite a problem with it, and they are doing their best. The police that I've talked to, they're really very concerned, but, it's quite a challenge. It needs to come from the people going out drinking, be a bit more aware, be with somebody that you can trust. I can't blame the bars. I've done quite a lot of training with bar staff. They're very aware, but there isn't a very good system. It needs evidence, chain of evidence kits to be more readily available, rather than going to the police and getting them out. I would say.
Yeah, Jim, thank you ever so much for coming on and talking to us about this critical matter. Really appreciate it. Now, we can go back to Michael Kill. Let's hope we've got a better connection. He is, of course, CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association. Thanks for sticking with us, Michael. I hope you heard Jim Campbell there, who was saying that these chain of evidence kits could be used without having to wait to be able to go to the police, to hospital, in order to be able to record incidences. And, he says that we're not blaming the nighttime industry. What sort of measures is your industry looking to adopt as we're seeing an increase in spiking incidents?
I think, there's a lot of work being done internally in terms of training, in terms of overt communication strategy, and looking at things like conditions on licenses that ask people to leave their drinks outside of the smoking areas. and also things like enhanced searching policy, duty of care. One thing I would say that is already happening is there is a proactive position between operator and police in terms of kits for evidence. The challenge that we have is information, the breadth of toxicology in terms of testing. So, that's already happening. We were on a meeting today with Scottish Government and have been on several meetings where we're discussing the categorisation and the tracking of crime so that we can really start to ramp up the understanding of how these crimes are being committed, what the characteristics are, so that we can tackle them head on. And I think there's a real strong collective approach to this. And the industry have really stepped up.
Michael, thank you ever so much. We've still got a bit of a dodgy connection there, so we're going to have to move on. But we are going to be continuing this conversation throughout the show. And, of course, I want to know what you think, especially if you've got stories or examples where you believe you were spiked or you know somebody that has been. It seems to be fairly prolific out there, so do let me know. It doesn't have to be something that's happened now. Let me know of any historic experiences, and let's try and get a measure of how serious this problem is. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can also tweet me at gbnews, and we're asking on Twitter, are we actually taking women's concerns seriously enough? Well, I would say after 30 years of regular reports of drink spiking, no. But I do want to know what you think. So continue to listen to what my guests have to say. Do cast your vote, and then I can give you at the end of the show a picture of how the nation is responding to this particular incident. Now, after the break, is Boris Johnson heading for a wake-up call in the first by-election after the sleaze scandal? Now, it's time for the weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Things turning cold out there. Overnight tonight there'll be a fairly extensive frost, and where we've got showers that could lead to things being fairly icy, and some spots may even wake up to a covering of snow. Low pressure clearing away but opening the door to cold air driving south from the Arctic, and these little weather features will bring a mixture of rain, sleet and snow, one in the east and one in the west. Initially though, we have rain covering parts of the south. That will clear through, and then we'll see clearing skies. The showers turning more and more wintry over northern Scotland and some across eastern England, so you could wake up to a covering here, and also through parts of Wales, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. Wherever we've got showers with temperatures down close to freezing, well below in rural areas, that could lead to some icy conditions. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place through the night and for Thursday morning's rush hour, covering eastern England, northern Scotland, Wales and the southwest. And in any of these areas, there is the likelihood of some snow showers for a time as well. Snow itself not expected to build up, but it's just an extra hazard to be aware of. That wintry mix of rain, sleet and snow clears from the southwest. The showers fade in the east, and for most, it's a fine sunny day tomorrow, but it will be cold. However, the winds won't be as strong tomorrow, so perhaps it won't feel quite as cold as it does out there today. It's going to turn pretty cold pretty quickly on Thursday evening, and temperatures falling away. But look at this, more wet weather moving in. And as that hits the colder air, there'll be some snow for a time across Scotland and also possibly through parts of eastern England during the early hours of Friday morning. Any snow early on will turn back to rain, however, and then it's a mostly grey day across the south on Friday, with rain clearing before more rain comes into the southwest. Much of the northern half of the UK, though, looks dry and fine on Friday with some sunny spells, and temperatures here 8-9 degrees, but in the south we're back milder again, back up to double digits. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation, This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
You're with the afternoon agenda here on GB News, and in a moment we'll be looking at the runners and riders in the Old Bexley and Sidcup by-election. But first, it's time for the news headlines.
Good afternoon. Here are the latest headlines. The Labour leader has told the Commons Boris Johnson has failed to deliver on NHS targets after promising to build 40 new hospitals. Mr Johnson has denied the claims from Sir Keir Starmer during Prime Minister's questions that his hospital building plan is unachievable. Spain and France are tightening restrictions for travellers from the UK. British visitors to Spain now have to show a COVID-19 certificate or prove they've had a negative PCR test taken 3 days before they arrive. The measures will remain in force until the 31st of December. A man has been arrested by police after breaching security at the Houses of Parliament. The Met Police say he was arrested on suspicion of trespassing on a protected site and that it is not a terror-related incident. Footage has been released of Arsenal defender Gabriel fighting off armed robbers at his home in London. One of the attackers, 26-year-old Abdi Muse, was armed with a baseball bat. He was later arrested and jailed for 5 years. Former British #1 Johanna Konta has announced her retirement from professional tennis. The 30-year-old has struggled with a knee problem over the past couple of years and slipped to 113 in the rankings. She says she's grateful for the career she's had. Well, that's it for now. I'll be back with a full news update at the top of the hour.
Thank you, Tamsin. Now, the parliamentary by-election for Old Bexley and Sidcup takes place tomorrow. 11 candidates are battling it out to represent the constituency previously held by the late James Brokenshire, who tragically passed away in October. Well, GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey is in the studio with me now. Darren, it's an interesting by-election. It's the first one since the Tories were hit, or I suppose Parliament itself was hit with the sleaze scandal. How is it looking for the government?
Well, it's quite difficult to tell because obviously trying to poll in one individual constituency is never very easy. I mean, first of all, we should say this is a very, very, very solid Conservative seat. James Brokenshire, who you just talked about there, of course, the former Northern Ireland Secretary, was a very popular local MP. He had a majority, I think, of nearly 19,000 only a couple of years ago. I mean, it would be incredible, disastrous, but also very, 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 very unlikely the Conservatives are actually going to lose this seat. This is far less tricky than, for example, North Shropshire, where we know Owen Paterson, who stepped down as the MP, that by-elections in a couple of weeks' time. That's going to be trickier for the Conservative Party. In saying that, the Labour Party do insist that they are making inroads into that Conservative majority, not least of all on that issue that you were talking about there when it comes to sleaze and the perception of sleaze, particularly around the Conservatives and second jobs and all that sort of stuff. So they do reckon that has actually kind of voters have noticed that story. It has resonated with some of them and they may well switch their vote. In the end, though, I think Alex, that it's probably going to be apathy that's going to be the main driver of this by-election, in the sense that it is a safe seat. It's December, it's cold, it's dark. How many people are actually really going to turn out and vote? I mean, just to give you a sense of how solidly blue this seat is, it was held by essentially Ted Heath for decades and decades. This is a true blue, suburban, southeast London seat.
But 11 candidates, I understand, in that by-election. We're actually going to show you who those candidates are now. So there's not really, you're saying, much hope of some of the smaller parties making a breakthrough, but it's a good opportunity for them, I suppose, to give themselves a platform.
Yeah, and there are a whole load of issues at play here, as there is in politics everywhere. It's not just going to be clearly on that issue that Labour are pushing. There will be, for some, the concerns about the restrictions that have been implemented in the last couple of days and the uncertainty that we see ahead. Obviously, not everyone's terribly happy with the isolation rules and the mask wearing, so that could pick up some votes for some of the minor parties. We know also that the cost of living is getting pretty tricky for lots and lots of people, and certain parties are focusing on that agenda, arguing that, frankly, this is something the government really need to focus on. We know tax rises, for example, are also coming down the road. And for others, it'll be about what happened at COP and potentially the government's engagement with environmental issues that will be at play. But in the end, when you look at the national polls for where the Conservative Party are, suggesting that will be somewhat replicated in this constituency, it's neck and neck pretty much between Labour and the Conservative Party at the moment. Now, that would swing certain seats, not this one, in any general election. So sizable is the majority the Conservative Party have. And really, people look at where Labour and Keir Starmer are at the moment, and they have done pretty well, it must be said, in the last couple of months in terms of landing some punches on the government, slightly improving the poll rating. But others would suggest halfway through a governmental term, what has been a pretty tricky few months for the government, the opposition actually should be 5-10 points in the lead at this stage rather than neck and neck. But there are those questions, of course, about the Conservative Party's performance, particularly the Prime Minister's performance in recent weeks with the way he handled the sleaze crisis to begin with. People might mention that Peppa Pig speech at the CBI and others among it. So it will be an interesting gauge. By-elections always are. They are, of course, also, they sometimes throw up results. Governments, do struggle sometimes to win them, particularly at mid-term. But I think in the end, the Conservative Party will almost certainly hold this seat. The real tricky one, I think, for the party will come in a couple of weeks' time in North Shropshire, because that is a constituency at the heart of the sleaze scandal. And there's a sense that the opposition parties there are starting to make quite significant inroads. But it will be interesting, and we'll have full coverage here on GB News. I'll be there at the count tomorrow night. We'll bring you the results in the wee small hours of Friday morning.
Hateful. I remember election counts. They go on all night in cold leisure centres. Do enjoy and have some...
It is actually in a leisure centre, so you'll be delighted tonight.
have some rather uninspired tea on my behalf. Thank you, Darren. Lovely speaking to you. We're going to take a quick break. But after that, the French want the UK to set up an asylum seeker processing centre in Calais. But are they doing enough to help ease the crisis? You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
It's been reported today that the French President Emmanuel Macron wants Britain to build a processing centre for asylum seekers in Calais as part of the solution to the ongoing migrant crisis. He's set to share his ideas in a letter to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But any initiative that would attract more migrants to the UK has been rejected by the government here. It follows a further breakdown in the relationship between the two administrations after the death of the 27 migrants in the Channel last week. Well, let's talk to the political commentator, Patrick O'Flynn. Would you be for an asylum seeker processing centre in Calais? I mean, there's the government saying, well, no, that's just going to be a draw. But the point is, if we don't have that, they're going to keep trying to get on boats unless more drastic action's taken.
Well, I very much agree with the government on this one, that this is an offer that's by no means too good to refuse. It's clearly a ruse from France just to keep the pressure up on Britain. France could very easily, if it wanted to, help Britain solve this problem with very few resources spent. And it could do that by agreeing to the Prime Minister's request to take back everyone who comes by irregular means across the Channel. That would break the people smugglers' business model, and no one would be paying them £2,000 or £3,000 to sit on a dinghy only to be returned where they started from. Now, it's not doing that, and setting up a processing centre in Calais would remove the need to even undertake that perilous journey and would just create a big new pull factor. In effect, France is asking the UK to put up with the Schengen agreement, so it's one frontier and then all the way up to Calais and on to the UK. So it's a complete non-starter. I can't see the French agreeing to the measure I set out and that the Prime Minister has requested. So the ball in the end is back in the government's court to do something which would be a standalone solution that Britain can impose without requiring the French to help, which they're obviously not going to do.
I mean, it's very hard. What sort of standalone decision can the government take? Because essentially, we're not allowed to sort of conduct operations in their territory. By the time they're in our territory, our only option is to really bring them over to the UK or watch people perish at sea. And there go the French, dismantling yet another migrant camp again today. So what options are left on the table?
Well, I think I agree with you if you were implying that the idea of pushing back these little boats in the world's busiest shipping lanes should be chalked down as a not going to happen, because I don't think it is going to happen. That leaves us with standard offshore processing, that basically we intercept the boats, we put them on a bigger boat, we fly them perhaps to Ascension Island, where we house them very well, and if the applications are turned down, then we provide all assistance to either return to countries of origin or help the people find a country that's willing to take them. What's fueling the business model for the people smugglers at the moment is the knowledge that 90% of the people are making it across. And of those, over 90% are never going to be asked to leave the UK. So the business model works. The irregular migrants are, in effect, getting value for money, even via this very perilous route. And if France won't help or can't be relied on to help, which it can't, the government either will have the nerve to implement offshore processing, which will probably require us to pull out of various long-standing, some would say antiquated international protocols, or it won't have the nerve to. And if it doesn't have the nerve to, then I think a lot of Leave voters who voted to take back control of our borders will start looking around for an alternative political party to support.
Now, when you talk about long-standing international protocols, do you buy the French argument that actually the fact that it was Boris Johnson publishing in the media the UK side of these negotiations that made him say, well, I'm not going to come to the table anymore because that's just not cricket. You're trying to bounce me into something and make me look bad. Or do you think that's just a fairly palsy French excuse?
I think the latter. I've noted over the last few months that France regularly has ministers who say outrageous things about the United Kingdom and post it up on Twitter. So I think Macron's display of pique there, I can't take that seriously at all. I also understand that behind the scenes and privately, the Prime Minister and other government ministers have been proposing this solution for a while now of France agreeing to take back everyone who crossed. I mean, France could actually stop patrolling the beaches and stop pretending to try and stop the boats setting off and reduce the resources it's deploying on this simply by saying, yes, you spot them coming across the channel, you return them to us and we'll have a couple of gendarmes on hand to process the return. It's not difficult for France, and that would in turn eventually undermine the pull factor that's drawing all these young men up through France to its northern ports. They don't want to do it because they appear to resent the United Kingdom being an island and having at least a theoretical possibility outside the EU and outside Schengen to reduce this traffic, because obviously France, Germany are experiencing much higher levels of irregular migration, economic migrants abusing the asylum system than even we are.
I mean, of course, there is the looming French presidential election next spring, and you've got a lot of the candidates in that election, from the sort of new candidate Eric Zemmour to even Michel Barnier, of course, and Marine Le Pen, very much talking tough on immigration. It's a big, big issue in that French election. So they're not going to want the optics of seeing boats of migrants returning to their shores. So we're in a pretty difficult situation.
We are indeed, and ultimately it's up to the British government to enforce the borders of the United Kingdom. And as I say, that may well require bailing out of the 1951 Geneva Convention on Refugees. There are various other compacts and conventions since then, which was all set up in an immediate post-war architecture where the asylum system was used by much lower numbers of fairly notable dissidents, and the aim of the global community was to facilitate their liberation. Now we're in the age of mass movement of people, mass migration. It's actually mainly the middle classes of poorer countries who are taking advantage of that to try and get to the French coast and then on into Britain, landing illegally. These conventions don't work anymore, but outside the EU, the United Kingdom has the possibility, and with its overseas territories too, the potential places to site offshore centres and really to set annual limits on the number of asylum seekers the United Kingdom will take and to take them from contiguous countries next to war-torn areas and to concentrate on family groups rather than just simply whoever has the money to pay people smugglers to pitch up on British beaches. In the end, the ball is in the Prime Minister's court. Either he's prepared to rock a few boats, as it were, diplomatically, to take back control for the UK, or it's all just window dressing, waffle. And that way, I think, really does lie trouble for the Conservative Party from its own right flank.
Patrick, thanks so much for coming on the show. Clearly, you're the Home Secretary that Britain's never had and who we desperately need. Patrick O'Flynn there, my old mucker, of course, back in my UKIP days. Now, on today's agenda is drink and needle spiking. And I'm asking, are we really taking women's concerns seriously enough? One viewer tweeted, I know someone that was spiked with injection. Luckily, the pub was shut down and ordered them a taxi. The other girl was lucky. Police found her wandering around and took her straight to hospital. Another says, force clubs to appoint spike watcher bouncers dedicated to look for this and its symptoms. Any incident, doors get locked, police called. Right to be searched is a foregone on entry. You make clubs spike safe. No one attempting this will visit one. Just saying. Now, After the break, how has your mental health fared during the pandemic? Well, a new report says we've struggled to get access to support and treatment. We'll be talking about that a bit later, but first, here's the weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Things turning cold out there. Overnight tonight there'll be a fairly extensive frost and where we've got showers that could lead to things being fairly icy and some spots may even wake up to a covering of snow. Low pressure clearing away but opening the door to cold air driving south from the Arctic, and these little weather features will bring a mixture of rain, sleet and snow, one in the east and one in the west. Initially though, we have rain covering parts of the south. That will clear through and then we'll see clearing skies. The showers turning more and more wintry over northern Scotland and some across eastern England, so you could wake up to a covering here. And also through parts of Wales, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. Wherever we've got showers with temperatures down close to freezing, well below in rural areas, that could lead to some icy conditions. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place through the night and for Thursday morning's rush hour, covering eastern England, northern Scotland, Wales and the southwest. And in any of these areas, there is the likelihood of some snow showers for a time as well. Snow itself not expected to build up, but it's just an extra hazard to be aware of. That wintry mix of rain, sleet and snow clears from the southwest. The showers fade in the east, and for most, it's a fine sunny day tomorrow, but it will be cold. However, the winds won't be as strong tomorrow, so perhaps it won't feel quite as cold as it does out there today. It's going to turn pretty cold pretty quickly on Thursday evening, and temperatures falling away. But look at this, more wet weather moving in. And as that hits the colder air, there'll be some snow for a time across Scotland and also possibly through parts of eastern England during the early hours of Friday morning. Any snow early on will turn back to rain, however, and then it's a mostly grey day across the south on Friday with rain clearing before more rain comes into the southwest. Much of the northern half of the UK, though, looks dry and fine on Friday with some sunny spells and temperatures here 8-9 degrees, but in the south we're back milder again, back up to double digits. Bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I think you'll be happy in the future too.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
right there. How are you bearing up? Pandemic has taken its toll on the nation's mental health, and it seems many of us have struggled to access support. The results of a new survey of more than 17,000 people reveals the pandemic has caused a drop in mental health care, with people not knowing where to turn in a crisis. The Care Quality Commission found people's experience of some areas of care is at its lowest point for 8 years. Almost half said their mental health had worsened because their treatment was affected. So where should we turn? Let's talk to the founder of the Happy People Project, Holly Matthews. Holly, what's your experience with poor mental health?
Well, certainly I have noticed over the last 2 years during the pandemic times, I have noticed in my spaces, in the Happy Me Project, in our Facebook group, in our community, in the membership, I've seen a massive surge in people looking for answers and looking for something else in a greater way than I saw before the pandemic. And I've, from my own personal stance, my own personal home, my two daughters, I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and even at that age, they're experiencing more anxiety than they did before because they're hearing all of this messaging, right? They're picking up on, whether it's the news, whether it's people's conversations, this heightened energy of fear. And it's just permeated throughout everything. So I've seen a huge increase in people contacting me during this time.
Do you think there's a problem as well in removing people from socialising has prevented what would normally happen if you go to the pub with your mates? You talk problems through, you share concerns. A problem shared is a problem halved. And instead we've been locked in our little echo chambers. The social media, there's been so many pushes of campaigns about mental health that might be impacting people's sense of well-being, because we're constantly being told you've probably got a problem because everyone's got problems, and you're going to start believing it.
Well, I think we have to be so careful about where our messaging is coming from, and you're absolutely right. Everybody suddenly had their crutches taken away from them, their friendship circles, their support, their going down the pub, whatever it is that we did before, suddenly we didn't have access to it in the same way. And all of the things, because the reality is that people had mental health problems before. They were often papered over by things like just being around people, and they didn't necessarily notice the things that were going on in their own minds. When we have to sit still in the way that we did over the last 2 years, suddenly we're aware of all of our thoughts. So you could look at it as, more people are aware, or I guess seeking out a diagnosis or a thing. But actually, I would arguably say that stuff was going on under the surface, but we had more outlets to navigate that stuff that we didn't have during lockdown times. And that's why, going forward, I personally think that people are now starting to talk about their mental health more than ever before. And actually, that can be something powerful that has come from all of this, that people are becoming aware of what their own personal triggers are, what their own personal difficulties are, and they are beginning to work on it. Now, yes, we do have the issue that there isn't necessarily access to all of the things that people need, but perhaps we do that on a community level. The stuff that I'm doing, there's plenty free stuff available for people and plenty communities that will scoop them up. The Happy Me Project Facebook group is a free space for people to hang out in and have that sense of community that perhaps they may have been lacking over the last 2 years. And I think we are where we are at in terms of the pandemic and everything that's going on with that. We have to then go, okay, we can't control a lot of the stuff that is outside of us and that's going on, huge chunk of it, and that feels quite frustrating for us. We have to look at what we can control, and that comes down to us personally and those around us.
I mean, how important is the sort of NGO and voluntary sector in all of this? Because in the 21st century, we're all being encouraged to talk about our feelings, identify our problems. There's been huge public awareness campaigns in mental health and well-being. And as we've seen, services are overburdened more than ever before. And where can people turn if they have what you might call, not to discredit them, but sort of more low-level and less pressing or urgent concerns about their mental health and well-being, that they're not, necessarily harming themselves or entering severe bouts of depression or whatever, and they want to be able to process and work through things. But the NHS is clogged up with people who desperately need care. What sort of places can they turn, and how important is it that these extra organisations and platforms exist?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many local, low-level things that are going on, and certainly, you know, the social media gets a lot of bad press in terms of how it impacts our mental health. But actually, you can find some really supportive communities online that are there to offer, as you say, the low level. We're not talking about mental illness, but we're talking about the anxiety that we have experienced. We have gone through so much in the last 2 years, regardless of how it has been for us individually. As a collective, we've gone through so much. So I think using social media in a positive way, there are tons of communities online. If you go onto Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, there's lots of access to really free basic stuff that you can be doing. And rather than us instantly thinking there needs to be a tablet for that, there needs to be a fix for that, there needs to be somebody else that comes in and fixes that for me. I think it is twofold. There is not one route to working through your mental health. I'm a huge advocate of therapies. I'm a life coach, so I work with when people they're at where they're at and where do they go forward, and having some tools to be able to do that. So I think there's lots of different spaces, and I think we now need to really assess as a country, as you know, as a global space, what we teach our children going forward. You know, when I'm talking with my children, I talk to them about, you know, what can you do, not what can't you do, because there's so much that we can't control in our lives, and you know that's been so heightened during this time. It's been so obvious to us, but that's always happening. We rarely have we have no control of the stuff outside of us. So if we can teach people now, having this opportunity to do that, the skills of resilience and the skills of bounce back, but actual real tangible stuff rather than just a meme on Facebook, like some actual stuff that people can do day to day. And that's why I think I've found such a huge jump in people coming to speak to me, because I'm a normal human being who has trained in life coaching and all of that stuff, but I do it on a very organic level. I'm in the trenches too. Like I'm doing the same stuff. I'm going through the same stuff, have gone through the same stuff. And I think that resonates with your normal men and women who sometimes may feel actually quite intimidated to go and see a GP or to go in a more professional setting, because perhaps that's actually a little overkill for what they're dealing with.
Yeah, no, Holly, I couldn't agree more. Holly Matthews, thank you so much. Holly from the Happy Me Project. Now, you're watching the Afternoon Agenda. Stay tuned, lots more to come. Hello and welcome to the Afternoon Agenda on GB News. I'm Alex Phillips. Now, it's time for the news headlines.
Good afternoon. The headlines this hour. The Labour leader has told the Commons that Boris Johnson has failed to deliver on NHS targets after promising to build 40 new hospitals. Breaking rules during last year's lockdown when he threw a Christmas party at Downing Street, saying he was defending the indefensible.
Right, the government takes the immediate practical step of asking people to take a lateral flow test before they board a flight into the UK, because at the moment, the way the system works, you can travel to airports on busy public transit systems overseas, you can go through a busy airport, board a busy flight, arrive in busy arrivals and travel on busy transport home. Having had a test, and that cannot be right, and we're calling on the government to take immediate action.
The Prime Minister was keen to switch the focus to the vaccine programme today, which will see all adults offered a booster jab by the end of January. But Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting, you just heard there, says more need to be done to prevent the variant from entering the country. The World Health Organization say they'll have more information about the Omicron variant of coronavirus within days. The WHO's chief scientist thinks current vaccines will be effective against serious diseases.
We know that vaccines are likely to have some protection. We still need to find out if there's any loss of protection, but we think vaccines will still protect against severe disease as they have against the other variants.
Meanwhile, Spain and France are tightening restrictions for travellers from the UK. British visitors to Spain now have to show a COVID-19 certificate or prove they've had a negative PCR test taken 3 days before they arrive. The measures will remain in force until the 31st of December. A man has been arrested after breaching security at the Houses of Parliament. Met Police say he was arrested on suspicion of trespassing on a protected site and that it is not a terror-related incident. Turning migrant boats back at sea is dangerous and could breach human rights, MPs are warning. A joint committee is urging the government to scrap its plans after the Home Secretary Priti Patel suggested it could deter those attempting to cross the Channel. The former head of UK Border Force, Tony Smith, told GB News France needs to work with the UK to solve the issue.
Strategy is, well, look, we're going to continue to disrupt these camps, but what we're not prepared to do is work with the UK to deal with a joint response on the Channel, which is absolutely what they should be doing. They have a duty, the same as we do, to save lives in their territorial waters. They have a capability to do that, but politically, they're not prepared to do that right now because it suits them.
4 people have been injured after a Second World War bomb has exploded in Munich. The aircraft bomb went off at a construction site close to the city's main railway station. The Munich Fire Brigade say 1 person has been seriously wounded. Police say there is no further danger to the public. Footage has been released of Arsenal defender Gabriel fighting off armed robbers at his home in London. One of the attackers, 26-year-old Abdi Muse, was armed with a baseball bat. He was later arrested and jailed for 5 years. Former US President Donald Trump has strongly hinted about running for office again. Speaking exclusively to Nigel Farage in his first British interview since leaving the White House, he talks about the Capitol Hill riot, Boris Johnson, and discusses his intentions for 2024.
Why would a man who's got all the things you've got, great family, wonderful life, why on earth would he consider going back into that hell again?
If you love the country, you have no choice. It's not a question. It's just, this is a wonderful, beautiful life. But I like that too because I was helping people. That's why I did it. And I think you'll be happy in the future too.
Well, you can watch the full interview tonight in a 2-hour special on Farage. That's at 7 o'clock. Well, those are the headlines. I'll bring you the latest in half an hour. Until then, it's back to Alex.
Have you ever woken up far from home with no idea how you got there, or felt as if you'd gone from zero to utterly wasted in an incredibly short period of time, with symptoms that frankly don't correlate with drunkenness, or in a bed that's not your own, in a taxi you don't remember ordering, or in a hospital with needle marks in your arms or on your back? This isn't just unsettling for those who have been targets, it's utterly terrifying. The incidence of spiking has been brought to light once again, following a terrifying spate of needle attacks, with women and men across the country reporting evidence of having been injected with something on a night out. 3 years ago, reports suggested spiking or lacing events had gone up by 108%. And yet moves to tackle this disgusting torrent of horrific abuse seem to once again have spluttered to a halt. Government Minister Mims Davis has revealed she's been spiked twice, yet her party seems to have no plans to introduce free drinks testing kits, while we wait on the Home Secretary receiving a report from the police before she commits to any action. Meanwhile, women have taken matters into their own hands, with solidarity through boycotts of nightclubs and late-night venues, demanding more rigorous searches on entry, covers for drinks and better training for bar staff, as well as fast responses to test potential victims as early as possible. What sort of sick society do we live in when socialising can result in being involuntarily drugged and potentially raped? Welcome to 21st century Britain, where today we really need to talk about spiking. Well, joining us now is Niamh Robinson, the editor of Impact, the University of Nottingham student magazine. And Niamh, we know Nottingham police have been making arrests in connection to spiking lately.
Hi, yes, thank you for having me on the show. So we have heard that there have been arrests made in the Nottingham area. And to be honest, we're not quite sure if this is reassuring or more concerning, because it just confirms our fears that these spikings really are taking place. And women and those identifying as women are feeling more and more unsafe and concerned as we go on these nights out in the city.
Are you rather incredulous at the fact when the first few women came forward and said, we've been jabbed with a needle, that most of the media seems to be saying, nah, you're not, you're making it up, can't be possible?
I think that was definitely a general feeling. There's a sense that women don't feel believed and that those coming forward are almost being treated as though they're overreacting or potentially looking for attention. And, it's a very sobering reality when you hear that actually arrests are being made and, there's evidence-backed, proof coming out now that many of these women have been spiked and actually may have been, administered with these drugs via needle. And so we're really just imploring the government and all of those in power to take us seriously when we say, please help us and start putting measures in place which are going to protect us.
Now, you edit your student magazine at the University of Nottingham. What sort of actions has your university taken to help protect the student body on a night out?
So the university have put a fair few measures in place. They've introduced a new reporting system. It's called Support and Report, and it's inclusive and it enables women to come forward and report their experiences. We also, as a magazine, conducted a university-wide survey speaking to over 800 students about their experiences, and the results of that were again very shocking. Rather than just looking at spiking as a standalone issue, we realised that this is a manifestation of a problem which is much bigger and largely directed at female safety and the safety of those identifying as women in Nottingham. And it highlighted that there's inherent issues within sort of attitudes and in just daily life really that seem to be manifesting in these club situations.
You did a survey of 800 students. Can you share with us some of the results that you got from that survey?
I can, yeah. So some of the results were that 90% of female students who experienced sexual assault or harassment actually decided not to report it. And that was perhaps one of the most shocking statistics we had. And I think that that was something that we really discussed as a magazine, as a team. We tried to really dig into why this was. Was it a case that people didn't know about the reporting system? Or was it more that women were frightened to come forward because they were fearful that they might not be believed? And I think the latter reason, unfortunately, is kind of the overriding issue here. A lot of the comments that were left were that, individuals felt that the perpetrator was very popular or quite wealthy or had connections, and therefore they didn't feel safe coming forward because they were fearful of the repercussions. And it begs the question, what is the point in having all of these really progressive measures in place if women, those identifying as women or those in sort of marginalised genders, are too fearful to use them in the first place?
Niamh, thank you so much for doing that survey and being on top of this situation in your magazine. That's Niamh Robinson, editor of Impact at the University of Nottingham, telling us, well, some pretty upsetting and horrific statistics there. Now, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Surrey, Lisa Townsend, joins me now. And you yourself have been a victim of spiking, haven't you, Lisa?
Good afternoon, Alex. Yes, I have. I'm many years ago now, over 20 years ago when I was at university in Sheffield. And I was very fortunate, actually. As you said in your introduction, it can be terrifying. And a lot of people do wake up far from home, not sure how they got there, and often with a stranger. That thankfully wasn't my experience. I was taken home by friends, by my housemates. So I woke up in my own bed. But the terrifying part is, of course, not knowing how you got there, not having any memory of it happening the night before.
I mean, I too was spiked 20 years ago, and it makes me wonder how, after 2 decades have passed, this seems to be a problem on the increase. What do you think has gone dreadfully wrong that nothing, seemingly, or not enough has been done to tackle this?
Well, I think one of the first things is that it may well have increased. What we absolutely know is that we're talking about it more, and I think that's fantastic. I didn't report it when I was spiked over 20 years ago. I don't know if you did, Alex, but my feeling was that there was no point in reporting it. What I did do is I went to the bar in question. I knew exactly where it had happened because I'd only had one alcoholic drink that evening. I didn't drink very much when I was at university. I was far too studious. And I'd been drinking water for that whole evening, apart from that one particular alcoholic drink I'd had in that particular bar. And when I went and spoke to the bar manager, and it was a few days later, it was during the day when the bar was open and getting ready, and they brushed me off. They said it couldn't possibly have happened in there. It must have happened in a different bar in the city. When I explained that it couldn't have happened anywhere else, their response was, well, it didn't happen in a bar like theirs. That sort of thing didn't happen. And if I was convinced that it did happen in that bar, that it must have been a dodgy batch of vodka, which of course is far worse, if you ask me, than admitting that something may have happened. They were far more prepared to admit that they may have brought in a sort of dodgy batch of alcohol that lots of people in the bar were drinking. But what I would always say is please, please do report it. And I do think that reporting is on the rise. I do think we're talking about it more. And this conversation, Alex, and the conversation that GB News is having, that's why it's so important.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's why we're doing this show. What sort of things as Police and Crime Commissioner are you saying in Surrey? What sort of actions do you think need to be taken to really clamp down on this?
Yeah, well, one of the things, of course, is making sure that people do report it. Now, the police, certainly in Surrey, and I know elsewhere, take this enormously seriously. Reports that we've had in Surrey, the police will go out, they will obviously talk to the victim. They'll also go and talk to the bar in question or the club in question to see what they can piece together. And that might mean looking at CCTV. It might mean looking at speaking to staff and seeing what they may have seen. I think as women, what I hate is sort of the idea that we have to police ourselves. And the idea is, what can we do to stop it happening? And of course, the answer is, what do we do to stop men doing this in the first place? But of course, we all know, and I think we're instinctively used to taking these actions. I suspect you, Alex, and I we've been doing it for years and years, and it's all the kind of things like making sure that you see your drink being poured, that you don't take a drink from a stranger, that if you leave to go to the ladies or something, that you make sure that somebody is looking after your drink, preferably don't leave it. If you're at a private party or a house party, don't drink out of a punch bowl or a jug. It's all of those things. But of course, as Neve said earlier, this is a much wider societal problem that we need to tackle. It needs to be made absolutely not remotely acceptable for men to do this. I always say to male friends, if you hear of anybody talking about this or any kind of assault against women, just make it clear that it's absolutely unacceptable. But the police are doing an awful lot and doing what they can, but this is not a problem we will police our way out of. It is something that society needs to deal with.
Yeah, you say it's not something we can police our way out of, and I agree to some extent that we all have to have each other's backs in this and be mindful of our friends have, gone from zero to looking drunk as a skunk in a very short period of time. Something's clearly amiss. But in terms of, surely it is a crime to, in an unsolicited manner, lace someone's drink or spike someone with drugs, especially if it's being done via needle. But I've not really heard of any sentencing or any charges brought against anyone. Did you have any information on that? What's going on there? Is it just that perpetrators aren't being caught? Are they actually being sentenced?
And this is part of the problem. Of course, certainly in my case and in the case of so many women, it was never reported. So there's that, of course. It is a very difficult thing to prove. We know that a lot of these substances disappear from the system very quickly. It's one of the reasons I didn't report it. I just assumed it wouldn't have stayed in my system. And also I was in the fortunate position that nothing ultimately very bad happened. Drink spiking, it does. It can carry a sentence of up to 10 years. And of course, it's not just drugs. If you are having a non-alcoholic drink and you've ordered a non-alcoholic drink, let's say you've ordered a Diet Coke and somebody slips vodka into it, that is also drink spiking. Obviously needle spiking would also be assault, physical assault, so there are obviously sentences that come with it, but proving this is, of course, as you'll appreciate, incredibly difficult, which is why we need women to report it. We need clubs and bars and all the places where drinks are served and consumed to take part in it. Of course, in order to have a drinks licence in the first place, that does mean that you have a duty to look out for the safety and welfare of those those who are drinking in your establishment. And it requires the police to take it seriously. And I do believe that the police are taking it seriously, and they're taking all crimes against women and girls much more seriously than they used to. I should also say that the evidence suggests up to about 11% of men are also victims of drink spiking and spiking more generally, which is incredibly important. And we do think that men are less likely to report it. So that's also really important. It's not just women we're talking about here, but it does disproportionately affect women and is a gendered crime.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, Lisa, and thank you for raising that point at the end. Lisa Townsend there, who's Police and Crime Commissioner for Surrey. Now, from one Lisa to the next, joining us now is Lisa Bascott, who's founder of Second Line of Defence, which is the UK's first female-focused recruitment agency in the private security sector. Lisa, what exactly is it that your firm does?
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. We, as you say, we are a recruitment company specialising in hiring women to be on the front line of establishments in the nighttime industry and or generally in the entertainment industry. And this is born out of a nationwide sort of problem at the moment, post-pandemic and post-Brexit, whereby there is a shortage of around 40 to up to 60% of door staff working in these establishments. Some of those people have gone back to Europe. Some of those people had to find more permanent work during the pandemic and are unwilling to go back to the work that they were doing before. There's a huge shortage. And on top of that, women make up 50% of the population. Part of my reasoning behind this is that we should be much more visible in establishments across the board, nighttime industries and anywhere else. Women bring different sort of skill sets to the role, and I think that they make, especially in the area, in the environment that we're in at the moment with all of the spikings, it makes women and young girls feel that much more safe when they see a female operative on the door.
Is it, do you think, for women who might feel vulnerable on a night out, who might think there's some things happening, they might not be believed, to actually have another woman to go to and say, I'm scared, this guy's harassing me, or I think something's happened, or, you know, I'm being intimidated?
Absolutely. One of the things that I sort of bring to the role is on a night out, I see myself as a facilitator working for the organisation. And part of my role when I'm welcoming guests into the establishment is to make contact with them, for them to see me as their first point of call, but also as that face that when I go inside of the establishment, that if anything goes wrong, they have no fear about coming up to talk to me. I make sure that I'm as approachable as I can be, but just being a woman in itself allays so many fears for so many young people, especially young students. I'm based in Hove, so it's a big university town. So the University of Brighton and Sussex, and there are big events and big nights on a weekly basis that happen at some of the establishments that I'm at. And I've had women come up to me and say how much safer they feel that they are just by seeing me on the door, or they've heard of me, you know, in situations where, let's say, there is a young girl who's intoxicated. They've listened to me deal with that person and make sure that that person is sober enough to get themselves home. And if they are not, that we ensure that we get them into a cab and get them home.
But what about your operatives, your female frontliners there? I mean, are they getting a different level of abuse, or a different way of being treated, particularly by, let's say, male customers at venues?
Not at all. In fact, I think I'm a welcome sight, and so are some of my other female colleagues doing this role. I've had nothing but positive comments about about seeing me on the door. I think everybody sees that it's unusual, but they are absolutely welcome in it, and that is men and women alike. So it's really positive.
Yeah, you're very welcome here on the afternoon agenda. Lisa, keep up the great work. I think it's a really important
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Lisa Bascott there, who is from Second Line Defence, who are putting female security guards in venues. Now, up next on the agenda, Health Secretary Sajid Javid says people should carry on with their Christmas plans, but there's criticism from the hospitality sector over mixed messaging from the government. First, the evening weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello. Things turning cold out there right now. Frosty for many by morning, and there is the potential for things to be a bit slippery as well. There are ice warnings issued and a little bit of snow in some spots. This area of low pressure is moving away, but it's opened the door to cold air driving south from the Arctic. And where we've got these little weather fronts, they will enhance the showers, and that combination of showers and cold air could lead to some icy conditions. Already across northern Scotland we've got some snow showers. Down the eastern side of England, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow showers, and the potential also through parts of Wales. You could wake up to a covering here, maybe even into the Midlands, and later on through the night across the southwest of England. So we do have that ice warning in place as temperatures drop down close to freezing. Even in towns and cities, rural areas will be well below. And as well as that ice, there is the likelihood of some sleet and snow for southwest England, Wales and the eastern side of England and northern Scotland. Say snow even to lower levels in some locations. As we go through the day, that mixture of rain, sleet and snow will clear the southwest. The showers will ease along the east coast, although there'll always be some. And across northern Scotland, it becomes dry. So for most, it's a dry, fine, sunny day tomorrow. But it will be cold, 3 or 4 degrees at best for most of us. At least the winds, though, will be a little lighter than that biting one that's been blowing through the day today. Then, during tomorrow evening, wet weather returns from the west, and as it hits the colder air, there'll be some snow for a time across Scotland, but even also further south over parts of England and Wales. It could, for a few hours, be a little bit of snow, mostly through the night, however. Perhaps early on Friday across East Anglia and the southeast, and quite quickly any snow will melt and turn back to rain. Quite a grey day then on Friday across the south. Rain clearing, but another spell of rain arriving in the southwest. Further north, though, Friday looks like a bright day with sunny spells and just a few showers, and turning milder across the south.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I think you'll be happy in the future, too.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
People should go ahead with their Christmas plans, Health Secretary Sajid Javid insists, though he says people should take a COVID lateral flow test before attending parties. That sounds jolly, doesn't it? Now, bosses of hospitality venues across the UK, including restaurants and pubs, warn that mixed messaging over the new Omicron variant by the government has already led to bookings being cancelled by parties over the festive period. Well, Dermot King is the CEO of Oakman Inns and Restaurants Limited, with lots of pubs and venues across England. Have you seen this? Have you seen lots of Christmas parties now being cancelled in the wake of the government announcement?
Yeah, good afternoon. It's probably well known now that Omicron is an anagram for moronic, and I've seen the strategy of the government strategy of the last 3 days playing out in our numbers of the last 48 hours. For every 3 new Christmas bookings we have taken, we've had 4 cancellations, and they've mostly been large office parties that have been cancelled, where businesses are telling their team that they can't socialise. Those big bookings are being cancelled. But for normal family bookings, for normal people, for smaller groups, we've seen no evidence of that so far. That's still robust, and our Christmas trading pattern still looks positive overall.
Is that because you think people are now anticipating that it's going to be a replay of next year, that we've started on the thin end of the wedge? It might just be a little bit of mandatory mask wearing now, but before you know it, we're going to be back to bubbles and social distancing. Is that what people are saying, or do they not understand what the current rules are?
I think we've generally put an anticipation of fear back into the consumer. Most people are sensible. Most people can make balanced decisions. But when the health secretary comes up and the prime minister and tells you not to panic, but everything coming from all his experts around us is telling us to do exactly the opposite, and people have a natural fear over that. And I just think that the government needs to get its story straight. The fact of the matter is, we've got half as many people as we had in hospital this time last year. We've got half as many people on ventilation as we've had this year. This time last year, and we've got no evidence that this new variation is going to cause any damage at all, actually, as far as we can see. And I think the sense of fear that's been played out is unnecessary, and it is causing people to think twice. But most people are being quite sensible and natural about it. Most people understand that the procedures and the processes that we've put in place for most restaurants and bars are creating safe environments, including the upgrade in ventilation systems and air extraction units that we've been putting in over the last 6 months.
And I mean, it's always a shame when Christmas parties get cancelled. Everyone loves a bit of office intrigue, don't they, when people have had one too many drinks. But in terms of, for you as a business, have you actually recovered from pandemic losses yet? Or is this going to hit you super hard if we end up back in restrictions over the Christmas period?
Over the last, we're getting on to 20 months now. We've been shut for such a long period of time. It's been taking a long time to recover, and we've just about got ourselves to a state that we're on an even keel again. Now, in our business, as it turns out, the COVID lockdowns has turned out to be opportunistic. I mean, we went into lockdown with a business that operated 23 venues, and we've come out of lockdown today with a business that operates 36 venues, and a lot of that has been opportunistic growth and unlocking a pipeline that we always wanted to develop. So I cannot look back on the last 20 months. I for the sake of my own sanity, I'd rather not have done it. But I cannot say for the business that we have experienced it badly. I think we've come out a much stronger business, a much bigger business, and actually, if I'm honest with you, I think we've done quite well out of it, actually.
Oh, well, testament to you, Dermot. That's not the message we often hear. And thank you for coming on the show today. Dermot King, CEO of Oakman Inns. Well, lots more still to come on the afternoon agenda. It's time to hear what you think about spiking. But first, it's time for the news headlines with Tamsin.
Thanks, Alex. Here are the latest headlines. The Labour leader has told the Commons Boris Johnson has failed to deliver on NHS targets after promising to build 40 new hospitals. Mr Johnson has denied the claims from Sir Keir Starmer during Prime Minister's questions that his hospital building plan is unachievable. Spain and France are tightening restrictions for travellers from the UK. British visitors to Spain and all non-EU arrivals to France now have to show a COVID-19 certificate or prove they've had a negative PCR test. A man's been arrested by police after breaching security at the Houses of Parliament. The Met Police say he was arrested on suspicion of trespassing on a protected site and that it's not a terror-related incident. Footage has been released of Arsenal defender Gabriel fighting off armed robbers at his home in London. One of the attackers, 26-year-old Abdi Muse, was armed with a baseball bat. He was later arrested and jailed for 5 years. 4 people have been injured after a Second World War bomb exploded in Munich. The explosive went off at a construction site close to the city's main railway station. The Munich Fire Brigade said one person has been seriously wounded. Police added there is no further danger to the public. Well, that's all for now. I'll bring you a full news update at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. The Parliamentary sleaze scandal continues to unravel, with the Conservative leader of the Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey among 9 facing inquiries by the Standards watchdog. Whilst Commons Standards Commissioner Catherine Stone won't be publicising details of the allegations, Labour's shadow Commons leader, Thangam Debonair, believes Prime Minister Boris Johnson must now assess whether Rees-Mogg broke the ministerial code. The Mail on Sunday claims he failed to declare £6 million worth of loans from one of his companies, something Rees-Mogg vigorously denies. Meanwhile, the Lib Dems say Sir Ed Davey referred himself to the Commissioner. Political commentator and former advisor to Number 10, Dr. Sean Worth, is with us now. Sean, great to have you on the show. It's not going to abate, is it? The lobby have smelt blood. They want heads to roll. What on earth should happen next?
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, I personally think the future of this is a bit unsustainable now, because we're already seeing in the Batley and Spen by-election that's just coming up that the candidates are being forced there to declare to the electorate that they won't take any other second jobs or extra incomes when they're in Parliament. And I think this will be a thing that all candidates will do, including in the next general election. They'll have to make some kind of pledge to the electorate that they'll not go off and do these moonlighting jobs for other companies and stuff. So I just think the whole thing stinks. And it's not just the Tory party, though. Jacob Rees-Mogg's numbers, that the amounts he's earning are absolutely stratospheric, which is kind of catching everyone's attention. But it's people across all parties have got second jobs and extra incomes coming in. I just don't think it's sustainable going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It doesn't seem to be sustainable, but there seem to be two particular groups when it comes to this situation. There are those who say, well, if you suddenly start saying to MPs, you can't have second jobs, you have to give up your business interests. There are a lot of talented people, and especially those who might have some acumen when it comes to running things, if they've been successful entrepreneurs or industrialists, or they just won't end up representing constituencies in Parliament. Then there are others who say, well, come on now, 81 grand is a pretty decent salary. You get expenses on top of that. Politics should be more of a vocation. And frankly, if you're mucking about with your other business interests, you're not focusing on the job at hand. Which camp do you put yourself in?
The latter one, I think. I mean, I've heard I've got MP friends, and they say to me, there's a lot of great skills that you can bring in. If you're a doctor, for example, there is possibly a role for continuing to be in general practice, so you can keep your hand into the latest treatments and things for patients if you want to go back into that profession. But for pretty much every profession, you don't need to carry on doing that while you're supposed to be representing your electorate. 80 odd grand, as you say, is a pretty good salary. It's a very good salary. If you ask any of your viewers, I imagine they'll all say it's a brilliant salary. If you're going into politics, you're not going into it for the money. Earn your money, then go in. It will exclude some people that are very good. You can get people that are perfectly capable of doing 2-3 jobs at the same time because they're just very clever, very high caliber people. But it's not about the practicalities; it's how it looks. If you're supposed to be a member of Parliament, but on the side you're working for some company from the Cayman Islands or something, even though you may not be doing anything wrong, that it just stinks and it just looks bad. So I just can't see it being sustainable in the future. The Prime Minister should have just banned everything, in my view. At the moment, he's only banned a couple of areas.
Yeah, do you think he should have also chucked a few people under the bus, or would that be setting in motion something that would then be very difficult to contain?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people that have second jobs across Parliament. I actually think the wider issue is extra funding going to MPs from anywhere, and there's routes. You tend to get in the Labour Party, you get less funding from business because it tends to come channeled through trade unions, which of course are partly funded by business. They're not all public sector organisations. We often think, the GMB and Unite, for example, have big diesel and fossil fuel producers. They're big pharma companies. So there's money coming from all sorts of places going into MPs' offices, and also there's money. Remember. Going to candidates before they become MPs, particularly through I'm not picking on trade unions and Labour for a party political point of view. It probably looks like that, but you often get trade union funding for actual candidates. They can give up their job, become a full-time candidate, get a seat, and then they're in Parliament, and then they get their office extra funding for office. And there's a question, obviously, well, what do they want in return? And certainly in other parties, it's much more about going to the private sector and having a second job. And then you get, well, what's the conflict of interest there? So even though I think 90% of cases, nobody's doing anything wrong, they're just doing a second job because they're high caliber people. They can manage 2 or 3 jobs. I can manage 2 jobs. Lots of us can, but it just doesn't look right.
Yeah, and let's talk as well about your old boss, certain Mr. Cameron. Do you think there needs to be a review as well of things like cooling off periods or rules about when people leave office? Because, of course, if you've been Prime Minister or Cabinet Secretary, your Rolodex is chock-a-block full of incredible international contacts that are worth a pretty penny when you go back into the private sector.
Well, yes, I mean, especially prime ministers, they classically cash in on a speaking tour. They often earn millions going around the world speaking at hedge funds and all sorts of places. I think there is a cooling off period, which is 2 years. I mean, when I left government, I was subject to a 2-year ban on directly lobbying anybody on behalf of a commercial interest, as I remember. So I think there is that in place, but the rules are breached. I think the real issue is there's no real challenge. If you do breach the rules, then what happens? Obviously it appears in the media, which is not great for your reputation, but I don't think there's any real sanctions that can be applied. I mean, I certainly don't think there's any offence committed, so it's hard to see what more they can do. But certainly I think that there should be a 2-year cooling off period, certainly, as you say.
And we've also got a couple of by-elections coming up, which won't have escaped your attention. Do you think that the recent sleaze scandals will impact those, or do you think that it's going to be sort of business as usual and people are more now interested in other big topics, COVID regulations coming back, for instance?
No, I think they've already impacted it. As I said earlier, the Batley and Spen by-election, which is coming up, I think it's tomorrow, voters going for that this week. The candidates for that, including the Conservative one, are already having to say, we promise, we've signed this sort of pledge in blood to never go off and work for second jobs for other companies. We're going to focus 100% on this constituency. So, as I said earlier, I think the cat's out of the bag now. I just don't think you can put this back in. I think every candidate in every election is going to have to sign some sort of pledge to say they're not going to be distracted with other work, and they're going to focus full time, and your second jobs or anything else that you do will be under so much scrutiny. But I think the bigger issue for by-election, certainly the one coming up, is just a general sense of Number 10's handling of things like the sleaze stuff, the social care vote that went through recently, various U-turns where the Prime Minister's put backbenchers up to defend Owen Paterson's sleaze scandal, for example, only to U-turn and make them all look embarrassed. I think that there is a general sense of kind of grip that Number 10 needs to get back. I think that will affect the by-election, but I mean, the next one is in a very safe Tory seat, and the last incumbent died in it. And I don't think there's any danger to the Conservative Party, but I think it's more an issue going forward.
Dr. Schonworth, thank you so much. It's been fascinating to hear from you on this topic, actually, and very sensible you are too, it seems. Lovely having you on the afternoon agenda. Let's get you back again. Well, now, from 7 p.m, Nigel Farage will sit down with none other than the former President of the United States, the Donald, in a GBNews world exclusive to discuss everything from Meghan and Harry to, of course, Boris Johnson to climate change and his plans for 2024. Here's a taster.
This is.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
We'll do it quickly.
Yes, sure, let's do it.
Oh, it's going to be a fascinating watch, isn't it? Ahead of that interview tonight, Nigel Farage reported back from Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
Yesterday, I did go to Mar-a-Lago. I sat down for half an hour with the 45th President of the USA, Donald J. Trump. And I think we covered a lot of areas. It's a very wide-ranging interview, some really interesting points. And as ever, Donald Trump doesn't hold back. He tells you what he thinks. For example, I talked about the Duchess of Sussex and the fact she's almost become a political lobbyist in the USA. Here's what he had to say about that.
I'm not a fan of hers at all, and I think she's very disrespectful to the Queen that we just spoke about, who's such a great woman, who's such a great person, historic person. I think she's very disrespectful to the royal family, but maybe most importantly to the Queen.
And of course, the biggest question of all, is Donald Trump going to run in 2024? Polls at the moment showing him ahead of Joe Biden in those key swing states. And I put it to him, I mean, why on earth would you give up an amazing life with your family around you at Mar-a-Lago, owning golf courses all over the world? Why give it up to go back into what is absolute hell? This is what he said.
If you love the country, you have no choice. It's not a question. It's just, this is a wonderful, beautiful life. But I like that too because I was helping people. That's why I did it. And I think you'll be happy in the future, too.
Well, I think that's the clearest indication we've yet had that Trump fully intends to run in 2024.
Well, love him or hate him, he's never boring, is he? Both of them, I mean. Earlier, GBNews spoke to American politics expert Laurie Laird and chairman of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. We asked Greg about the potential of Trump running again for president and whether America was experiencing buyer's remorse after electing Joe Biden last year.
There are some issues about age. That's something you'll have to think about at decision time. I would say right now he has every intention to run for president, and as long as he knows he can win, or he has a great possibility of winning. But yeah, there is buyer's remorse. There's no doubt about it. Independents, where Biden won, pretty comfortably, have dropped amazingly. They're in the 20s, and his overall polling, which we all know is horrendous. It's the greatest drop, from a inauguration to December or November of the first year. It's the greatest drop, since polling started. So, look, there's no doubt that there's buyer's remorse. I think people regret it, especially independents, and that's what swings elections. So, if the election were tomorrow, Trump would win would win comfortably, to say the least. And I think most decent Republican candidates could win comfortably because of Biden's performance so far.
And you mentioned there, I want to pick up on a point you've made, which is that it's not necessarily Trump that would win. You actually believe that even if another Republican was in office, they could potentially win, actually, because the people would be voting for the Republican Party necessarily rather than the figure. And do you think that people have had this taste of Trump, haven't they, for 4 years? And he was a divisive figure. Of course, lots of people loved him to death, and lots of people equally hate him. But after a few years of Joe Biden, perhaps lots of American people will be like, this feels more like normal politics. And actually, we quite like normal politics, not politicians mouthing off on Twitter. Do you think that will have an effect on people's inclination to vote in somebody like Trump again?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, Mercy. And there's no doubt that Trump's, tendency to send mean tweets and to be confrontational cost him some votes, especially with suburban women. So, that's a meaningful issue. And I think a Trump-like candidate, I don't mean Trump-like in personality, but a Trump policy supporter, someone who's been around the administration and gets the policy, without some of the drama and without some of the controversy, they would win comfortably, in my opinion. Now, you might lose some of the real Trump fans, the true Trump believers that voted only because it was Trump. And we see that here in this country with Boris. But I think, generally speaking, the policies of the Republicans, of Trump, actually worked, and everything was humming along before the COVID pandemic.
Oh, all right. Laurie, I'm going to throw back to you, and just say I could sense you maybe itching to get involved there, but I would just like to ask you, Laurie, as well. Isn't it better for Britain? Isn't it better for Britain as well, though, that Trump gets re-elected? Because actually he likes us in a way that President Biden appears not to.
President Biden does not appear to like Britain very much. And there have been so much talk. There has been so much talk about the special relationship. And I think Joe Biden has made it pretty clear if the U.S. has any sort of special relationship with anyone in Europe, it's Ireland. He makes such a play of his Irish roots. And let me tell you, his Irish relatives immigrated in the 1850s. I mean, this is not someone who was just off of the boat, but he has made that extremely clear. But I think one thing that's very interesting, I agree with Greg that the Republicans are in a very good position here. And the interesting question is, why have the Democrats done so poorly? Is it the view of infighting? Because there are so many wings of the Democratic Party, and this was inevitable. The Democratic Party in 2020 united for one reason, and that was to defeat Donald Trump. And they managed to paper over a lot of the cracks in the Democratic Party. But the far left of the Democratic Party is so far to the left of America in general. And I think that's one of the things that is dogging Joe Biden, that despite the fact he's fairly centrist and has got some pretty heavy duty legislation through.
Well, we've been talking about drink spiking today, and it's a subject that I think we've really needed to cover for a while, ever since we've heard about this latest spate of people saying that they have been stabbed with needles when they're at late-night venues. A pretty horrific thought. But drink spiking, of course, has been going on for a very long time. And we've raised the question of why on earth, when for decades this has been an issue, nothing has been talking about it. Well, earlier we put out a Twitter poll asking whether you think we're taking women's concerns seriously enough. The results are in, and 37% of you say yes, while the vast majority of you, 63%, say no, we're not, which of course begs the question, why? Well, lots of you have been getting in touch. One viewer says, better still, teach respect, to which someone else added, well, that'd be a good start, along with advising sensible precautions in the first place for men and women. Well, you can advise the sensible precautions, can't you? But if someone's going around stabbing people unwittingly, well, not wittingly, but not to the knowledge of the victim with needles, how on earth do you take precautions against that? Another viewer says, is any crime taken seriously nowadays? It appears that there is more emphasis and care for the perpetrator than the victim, and this is clearly evident by the ridiculously lenient sentences that are being given out. And finally, one email says, if it was happening in Parliament bars, you would see immediate action. I beg to differ. My very opening monologue, I mentioned that a very good friend of mine is certain that she was actually spiked in one of Parliament's bars, having later on, at an event in Parliament, having later on woken up in a very unfamiliar setting. The viewer goes on to say, this needs an instant response by our lawmakers. I couldn't agree more. You've been watching The Afternoon Agenda with me. I hope we've been covering a critical issue today and just keeping pressure on and public awareness on something that should keep all people safe, whatever your background, whatever your age, whatever your sex. I'm Alex Phillips. Join me again tomorrow from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. for another big item on the afternoon agenda. Coming up next, of course, it's the wonderful Michelle Dewberry with Jubes & Co. You don't want to miss it. That's all I've got time for today. So for me, it's have a good evening. Bye-bye, and I'll see you tomorrow.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello. Things turning cold out there right now. Frosty for many by morning, and there is the potential for things to be a bit slippery as well. There are ice warnings issued and a little bit of snow in some spots. This area of low pressure is moving away, but it's opened the door to cold air driving south from the Arctic. And where we've got these little weather fronts, they will enhance the showers, and that combination of showers and cold air could lead to some icy conditions. Already across northern Scotland, we've got some snow showers. Down the eastern side of England, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow showers, and the potential also through parts of Wales. You could wake up to a covering here, maybe even into the Midlands, and later on through the night across the southwest of England. So we do have that ice warning in place as temperatures drop down close to freezing. Even in towns and cities, rural areas will be well below. And as well as that ice, there is the likelihood of some sleet and snow for southwest England, Wales and the eastern side of England and northern Scotland. Say snow even to lower levels in some locations. As we go through the day, that mixture of rain, sleet and snow will clear the southwest. The showers will ease along the east coast, although there'll always be some. And across northern Scotland, it becomes dry. So for most, it's a dry, fine, sunny day tomorrow. But it will be cold, 3 or 4 degrees at best for most of us. At least the winds, though, will be a little lighter than that biting one that's been blowing through the day today. Then, during tomorrow evening, wet weather returns from the west, and as it hits the colder air, there'll be some snow for a time across Scotland, but even also further south over parts of England and Wales. It could, for a few hours, be a little bit of snow, mostly through the night, however. Perhaps early on Friday, across East Anglia and the southeast, and quite quickly any snow will melt and turn back to rain. Quite a grey day then on Friday across the south. Rain clearing, but another spell of rain arriving in the southwest. Further north, though, Friday looks like a bright day with sunny spells and just a few showers, and turning milder across the south.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
you'll be happy in the future too.
Coming up Wednesday on a special edition of Dan Wootton Tonight, GB News star Nigel Farage will be here to break down the bombshell revelations from his world-exclusive interview with Donald Trump. And he'll reveal all the secrets from behind the scenes at Mar-a-Lago. Then, one of Trump's top White House advisors, Sebastian Gorka, gives the first reaction from the former president's inner circle. Plus, we'll debate if the Donald can become commander-in-chief again and reveal your verdict. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, airing 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
I think you'll be happy in the future too.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Jubes and Kerr. Tonight, Prime Minister Boris Johnson officially says that we are, I quote, extremely unlikely to have another lockdown. However, don't you think the seeds of fear have been sown? Why do I say this? Well, events are being cancelled, work from home notices are coming in, and the new COVID regulations are enshrined in law until March. I wonder, are we heading towards a lockdown by